All right, guys. Make it stick. High level overview. I've set a timer for 25 minutes, and I'm going to try to get as much out of this book in 25 minutes as possible. So where am I going to start? I already have a little bit of idea. I've read about 20% of the book, maybe about a third. That's been a couple months ago. And so I want to fully digest this book. I think it's one of the most important books there is, most valuable resources on learning there is out right now in 2025. And so I really want to download as much information as I can from this. And I personally believe if you want to really digest a book, you don't start just with page one and start reading the first page and then read it page by page. I used to do that. I did it with 50 plus books. I think the way you do it now is you first get a broad overview. And so let's start with what I know. Make It Stick is a book written by, I believe, 2 cognitive scientists and a writer. There's 3 of them. But what's the main idea of the book? Let's start there. That's more important. The main idea of the book is, I don't know what the main idea of the book is. It's about learning. I think it's learning techniques. I think it's practical learning techniques. It's not epistemology. It's not talking about what is knowledge, what is truth, how do we know anything. It's how do we reliably learn new skills and new knowledge practically. I think that's the main idea. And if we look at the tagline, the science of successful learning, maybe that's the big idea. Maybe that would be probably the big idea. So it's science of learning, the modern science of learning techniques. Really, that's the main concept. And so what I'm remembering is it talks about practical techniques. It talks about active recall. It talks about interleaved practice. It talks about the generative effect. It talks about varied practice. But I think there's 8 chapters, and each of the chapters is a big idea. I think it's a well-structured book. So the biggest overview is science of learning, modern science of learning techniques and kind of theory, modern learning theory, science of learning. All right. Then under that science of learning umbrella, main idea, we got 8 chapters. Each one's a different big idea of the science of learning. The first chapter, I believe, is learning is misunderstood. And it's this weird concept and this weird thing where when we feel like we're learning, it's actually often we're not learning very well. And actually when we feel like we're not learning very much, that's when we're learning the most, strangely enough. And that has to do with a concept of massed practice or mass practicing, in which you keep repeating the same thing over and over again. So if I wanted to play a riff on the guitar, I play the riff on the guitar, and then I play the riff on the guitar, and then I play it again, and I play it again, and again. Or I'm playing basketball, I shoot a free throw, I shoot a free throw, I shoot a free throw over and over and over again. In that process, typically I'll improve pretty rapidly. I'll not be able to really play the riff at first, then I'll get better, then I'll get better, then I'll get better, and then I'm playing it pretty well in that one learning session. And that gives you an illusion of competence. Mass practice gives you an illusion of competence. But if you step away from the guitar or the free throw line and you come back later, then you forgot it, or you're not as good as you were when you left. And so it was kind of illusory. However, when you do things like varied practice, you do 1 rep with high attention in a way you've never played it, you start in a different position, you played in a different key, you played at a different tempo, you'll actually be like, man, you only play it once, you'll be like, man, I'm not very good, or I don't know it very well. But then the next time you come back to it, you'll actually be better than you were when you left off. Versus mass practice, you'll be worse. And there's actually this concept that mass practicing leads to encoding in the brain. And encoding is a concept in here of taking stimuli, deriving meaning, and then storing it in memory, encoding it into memory. And so there's a concept in here about encoding that if you mass practice, it gets encoded differently and gets a weaker encoding signal from the brain, because the brain's like getting maybe a rapid feedback, thinking like we're getting through it, we know what's going on, we're good, we're learning it, we got through it, good. Versus one time you're like pissed off, you're agitated, you're like, man, I got 1 try and I suck at it still, and I've done this like multiple days in a row. Your brain's like, oh, we need to encode that pretty importantly. Something's wrong, it keeps coming back up, and we're getting it wrong every time. So that's that. Learning is misunderstood. Now let's what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna look at the chapters and I'm gonna come back and active recall the main chapters and what I think they mean or what I remember. All right, and so about 30 seconds later, like I said, I got 25-minute timer. It's ticking down. I'm going as fast as I can, getting as much information downloaded as possible. One of the chapters is called to learn, retrieve, to learn, comma, retrieve. And so it's basically saying like, the way to learn things is to actively pull it out of your own mind, not to consume. If you read something, you're consuming. Until you think about it, until you retrieve, until you talk about it, until you write about it, until you use it, you're not going to remember it or you're not going to learn it well. So to learn, retrieve, and that's active learning, essentially. To learn, use active learning. Well, what is active learning? Testing, right? Tests are great. Active recall, what I'm doing right now, I read something and then I talk about it. Then elaboration is like I'm taking it, I'm trying to drive meaning from it, what I think it means. I'm building neural structures, or I'm planting seeds of neural structures that will then be built when I sleep. And once they're built, then I can keep adding to them and I can prune them and I can reshape them and mold them. But you need to lay the seeds first. And what active recall does in elaboration and testing is they plant these seeds and they start developing these neural structures. So to learn, retrieve, active recall, testing, the generation effects, so you're generating things from your own brain, active forms of learning rather than passive forms of learning. Another one is avoid illusions of knowing. That's a chapter, and I already kind of touched on that. It's you think you've got an illusion that you think you're learning and you think you know what you're talking about, but it's actually false confidence. I think there was something about varied practice, a chapter about varied practice, like mix it up, to learn, mix it up or something. That's not directly the title. I can't remember that. I know the last chapter is make it stick, so I'm sure that's a recall. That's all I'm recalling right now. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm not going to do it again. I already did it. I already talked about it today. I talked about the main concept, the science of learning, as we have in whenever this book is written, the 2000s plus, 2010s. And there's 8 chapters. Avoid illusions of knowing. Make it stick. To learn, retrieve. Learning is misunderstood. There's 4 of them. I'm missing 4 others. I think one's about varied practice, but we've already done it. Now it's time to go to ChatGPT. I have a ChatGPT model that's called my learning system that I've trained on all the concepts I know about learning already. So active recall, testing, generation effect, varied practice, interleaved practice, everything I know, the main most powerful learning techniques I've already trained into this ChatGPT model. So what I do is I come in and I say, hey, I want to master Make It Stick by Brown, Roediger, and McDaniel in 10 minutes. High level overview of mastery in 10 minutes. And then it's trained to basically to give me as little information as possible so that it's only like asking questions. It's never really telling me, it's just questioning me. And so I develop these ideas and I generate these ideas and I actively learn. And so I'm gonna go do that now. All right, guys, wrapping it up. I just did my ChatGPT session. One thing I realized is another concept of the book is desirable difficulty and difficulty. That difficulty and embracing difficulty is actually what leads to neural growth and learning. To learn, you should embrace difficulty and easy learning, along with passive consumption, non-active learning, as well as mass practice can all lead to illusions of knowing. Now, one thing I did come across is that for certain skills, motor skills, actually mass practice may be beneficial when you're learning the skill initially to get you to basic fluency. So that guitar riff, until you can play the guitar riff, and then once you can play the guitar riff, then you start interleaving it. As in, there's like a difference between practicing and learning. And to learn, you just want to keep playing it until you can play it. But then to really lock it into long-term memory, to really digest it, maybe. I don't know if that's the right word, but chunk it, take those chunks and make them like fluid with other so you can use them creatively on your own. Then you're going to want to practice and use interleaved practice and maybe spaced repetitions. So, well, that's a good question to pose. All right, good question to pose. Is mass practice? Should I use, or is mass practice more effective and more efficient for learning a skill? Or should it be avoided altogether? And should I always use spaced repetitions and interleaved practice? So here's going to be a question I'm going to keep in mind while I'm reading this book and studying this book so that I know what to look for. And that's a big question for me for guitar and just for general knowledge is when learning a motor skill, should I mass practice in order to learn, to initially learn? If so, when do I say I've learned it? Learned it. And transition into practice, parentheses, interleaved, spaced, and varied. So kind of two questions. Because I was under the impression before I started doing this, ChatGPT, that was the 25-minute timer. So to wrap up, I was under the impression that I should never mass practice and it will always lead to worse results. But ChatGPT is now telling me this. I don't know if I trust it. But now we have the question and we've got the book, and eventually, with this in mind, once this has already been established as a priority, now I will basically be searching for it while going through this book. That's how you do it. 25 minutes, active recall, and I got as much from that book as I could within 25 minutes at this stage in my learning system. So I'm excited to do it again tomorrow and see how much more we can learn from this book. I think this is a really good one to really get everything from, to be able to intellectually and systematically take everything from it, see both sides, talk about what it's about, debate what you think about the book. I want to get it all from this book. So that's it. We're in 26-minute territory. It's over. So I'll talk to you later.